In this video we're going to see how to track the length of stay on a search level via Google Analytics and using a tool like a Google Tag Manager on a search level rather than on a booking level, so that we can understand how we perform for each and every length of stay level. And even though you might already have this tracking through your proprietary solution, through your booking engine, having this in Google Analytics will help you much further because you can connect with the data tracked on your website and you can use these data in your advertising. These and more coming up, so let's dig in. The reason why we might want to track the length of stay in Google Analytics is because we want to see for how many people search rather than book for a certain amount of nights. Because it's very easy to check for how many people book like 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, 7 nights in the CRS or in the PMS. But what's important to notice, or what's important to track in my opinion, is okay, what is the conversion rate for each and every length of stay? In other words, what's the conversion rate for 1 night? What's the conversion rate for 2 nights? What's the conversion rate for 7 nights? And so on and so forth. And the reason why we might want to track that is because, of course, when we know the performance of each and every length of stay, then we know eventually how better to promote our hotels with, for example, better special offers, packages, or rates, depending on the length of stay. Now, if we want to make a very quick example, let's say that you have 100 bookings for 1 night over a certain period of time and 100 bookings for 2 nights for the same period of time. Now, if we just look at the length of stay from a booking perspective, you will see, and you probably end up concluding that 1 night and 2 nights are eventually appealing in the exact same way. However, if you notice on a search level that 100 bookings for 1 night is the result out of 1,000 searches, as opposed to bookings for 2 nights, the result of 10,000 searches, then you clearly see that those searching for 2 nights are not finding the hotel as much appealing as those searching for 1 night. And so from a traffic perspective, you have way more people searching for 2 nights, but not converting as well as those searching for 1 night. And since we sell rooms and rates, but we also sell nights, actually 1 night is a different product than 2 nights. And so we might want to create a different value proposition depending on these numbers, depending on these stats and figures. And last but not least, when you have this information in your hand, you can better detect the OTAs undercutting your rates. And so, for example, if I see that I have a drop in performance for length of stay 3, meaning for people searching for 3 nights, I have searches but not many bookings, then the very first thing that I do is to go out there and the OTA side and check whether they have been doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. And believe me, based on my experience, this is exactly what happens most of the times. But without further ado, let's see how to do this, how to track the length of stay on a search level. And we're going to be using Google Tag Manager, of course, and we're going to be sending the length of stay on a search level on both Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4. Needless to say, there are hundreds or probably thousands of different booking engines, and therefore hundreds or probably thousands of different ways of tracking custom parameters like length of stay or a combination of adults and children or the booking window or search window, whatever we want. And so for the purpose of this video, I'm going to cover a couple of examples, 2 or 3 different scenarios that you might get into or run into with your booking engine, and therefore you might need to slightly adapt what I will be showing to you so that it's going to be working for your booking engine. And so here we are in Google Tag Manager. So in a moment I'm gonna hit the preview button, which will open up a booking engine page, a test hotel booking engine page, and see what we're gonna have in there. So let's hit it. And so here we are, our page has opened up. This is specifically the check availability page or search availability, or call it the way you want, rooms and rates page. And so what we want to do first is to go check in our preview, the tag assistant page, and see what we have in there. And so like I said, there are multiple different ways of tracking the length of stay. And that really depends on the structure and on the capabilities of your booking engine. The very first way that I would suggest you going for is, of course, the data layer, meaning in the payload event here on the left, just search for the container load, the first container loaded available in the payload, and then hit the data layer variable, sorry, the data layer tab, and see whether you have something in there that tells you about a number of nights, meaning the length of stay. Like in this case, we don't have, but let's see if we scroll up, we'll see like here we have an event called impression, and here we have a data layer variable which says nights with 2, the value of 2, which is exactly the number of nights between this arrival date and this departure date. Now, nowadays there are many booking engines that are pretty professional in that sense, meaning that they output as much data as possible directly into the data layer. And a data layer, as I said last time, is essentially just an object or a place where we can store a whole bunch of information that can be used for tracking purposes. And like in this case, we have quite so many useful information, not that many, but quite so many useful information, like the check-in date, the checkout date, the number of nights, and again the number of adults and number of children. And so in Google Tag Manager, it is extremely easy to go after and read those values. And so let's do it right away, because we can go into Google Tag Manager and then variables, and then we hit the new. And then Google Tag Manager already has a pre-built-in data layer variable. So all that we need to do is just hit this data layer variable. And then we just need to instruct, okay, what is the data layer variable name? And simple as that, we just take the first name that we see in here corresponding to our value. So in this case, it's going to be nights. I'm just going to copy and then paste it in here, nights. And that's all that we need. And so let me just give it a name, nights, save. And now we can refresh our preview mode and see what that variable returns in the Tag Assistant preview mode. And so the booking engine has opened up again. We have refreshed the page. So let's get back to our Tag Assistant. Let's see continue. And let's see again, for example, the impression event that we've seen before. And now let's go into variables. And into variables, we can see that DLV nights with the value of 2. So we already have now this variable, we already have now this value, and that's all that we need. We already have the length of stay, we can just use it as a custom dimension. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you how to send this value over to Google Analytics, but let me just cover a couple of additional examples, meaning when it comes to booking engines that, as opposed to this case, the booking engine doesn't deploy the length of stay or the number of nights directly into the data layer. And so we will need to go for alternative ways to actually compute how many nights people have searched for. And so here we are with the same test hotel, same booking engine, but the situation has changed a little bit, because let's assume that this is our data layer after having the rooms and rates page open up in the guest browser. And then here is the data layer, and as you can see, we no longer have the number of nights. So that value of 2, which corresponded to the number of nights, so length of stay, is no longer available. And so we will need to find alternative ways. And so what is the alternative way? Well, I think in this example is pretty easy, in the sense that we already have the information needed in order to compute the length of stay. In other words, we already have the check-in date and the checkout date. And so in order to compute the length of stay, first we need to get back and to retrieve back the check-in and checkout date. So same as we did before for the number of nights, we're going to create 2 new data layer variables, respectively for arrival date and departure date. And so very simple, arrival. And then the value, we are just going to copy this one. So check-in, check-in. And I'm going to create another one, which is going to be DLV departure. Data layer variable. Let's see what the variable name is. Checkout. Check out. Now that we have the 2 data layer variables respectively for arrival and departure, we can now create a new variable. This time is no longer a data layer variable because I said that we no longer have the number of nights as a data layer variable, but we can do it with a little piece of code, a custom JavaScript code. Now, I know that this might sound a little bit tacky, but if you point out in the description, I put a link that it includes essentially that piece of code that I'm gonna show you in a moment in here. And so you can just grab it, copy paste it, and it's gonna be working. So this is the JavaScript code, and all you need to do, you just need to copy paste it, or if you want to just manually write it, as you can see it on my screen. There are just two tiny little things that you will need to change, and those two changes are respectively the start date and end date. In other words, we will need to pull back in those data layer variables that we have just saved a moment ago. And so to do that is very easy. No matter your technical knowledge, all you need to do, just open a double curly brackets. Automatically it's going to give you a sort of drop down menu with all available variables in your Google Tag Manager account, and all you need to do is just to select respectively the arrival and departure date. So DLV arrival, here it is, and then we go into the end date in the middle here. We just open again double curly bracket and we select departure. Everything else is already being taken care of, right? So nothing else that you need to do other than adding your data layer variable arrival and departure date. And so let me just save this one with a name, CGS, which stands for custom JavaScript, and then we can put nights. Save it, and let's now refresh our page and let's see what Google Tag Manager returns. Okay, the page has opened up, so now we can go back to our tag assistant page. Let's get back to our impression event in the payload, and let's see under variables what we have. CJS nights number 2. Another very common situation though is when you are left behind with no information, no useful information in the data layer that you can use in order to compute the number of nights. Like in this case, still our impression event. However, if we look into here, we don't have any length of stay, and we don't have any starting date, any arrival date, nor any departure date. And so the data layer, for our purpose, for our goal of determining what is the length of stay, is totally useless. And so we will need to find another alternative way. And the best option when you cannot rely on a data layer is to check the URL. And so if you take this, for example, this is TravelClick, so another very common booking engine. And by the way, TravelClick, just like Synexis, just like many other booking engines, they do provide with information in a data layer. But okay, let's just assume that you don't have a data layer, that you don't have anything. You have another booking engine. So what you can check is the URL, and just go after the question mark when you have all the URL parameters, and just trying to look whether something resonates with the arrival date, for example. So we are going to need arrival date and departure date. Even better if we find the number of nights, but probably you're not gonna get it. And so same as before, we can just rely on arrival and departure date. And here they have it. This is a booking search for June day 12 for one night. So 12th of June arrival date, 13th of June departure date. And if you check in the URL, here they are. And that's all that we need. So when get back to our Google Tag Manager, in this specific case, this Tag Manager is not connected to this booking engine, but I am just pretending that it is, because it's going to be very easy to read the URL parameters. So always go into variables, and then under new, before we have seen data layer variable and custom JavaScript. In this case, we go for URL, and specifically we want to tell query. Query is just another way of saying a URL parameter. And what we need to do and what we need to put in there is just the name of it, which is everything that comes before the equal before the value. All right, so this is the value of the arrival date. So there is an equal before it, and before that there is our URL parameter name. And so we just copy this and then get back to Tag Manager and we paste it in here. And that is going to be our URL variable, and we're just going to call it date in. Again, this is just an example, and this particular Google Tag Manager is not connected to this account. The good thing though is that no matter the format of the check-in date, like in this case, as you can see, we have month and then day, and then year, and the separator is a forward slash. In the case before, we have a different scenario where the date format used to be year in 4 digits, month, and then day, and the separator was a dash. And so the good thing though about the custom JavaScript that I have provided you with is that it works either way. All right, so no matter what the format of your date is, as long as arrival and departure date have the same format, meaning they both have the exact same separator and they both have the month, year, and day in the same order, that is going to compute the number of nights. Last example, and then probably we are done. Now, this is the same test booking engine that we were looking at before, and we are left in the same situation where the data layer doesn't retrieve any information about the number of nights, arrival date, and departure date. So we can just rely eventually on the URL. But the URL in this case, as opposed to TravelClick, for example, is a little bit different in the sense that the arrival date and the departure date are split, or the values, like in months, days, and years, these three values are split in 3 different variables. So as you can see here, we have one parameter, gg equal, and then 27, then mm for the month, so July, and aa for the year. And the same thing is for the departure date, so 29 ggf, mmf, and then aaf. Now, it's a little bit more complex, but it's something that we can definitely do. So again, since this is not so common, but not even so rare, so let's see together how to do it. To be honest, I have already prepared it in the sense that what I've done, I have created the 6 URL variables, same as we have seen before, each of which reading each of these 6 pieces. So the day of the arrival date, the month of the arrival date, the year of the arrival date, and then the same for the departure date. And what I've done after that is that I have simply created 2 other JavaScript variables. Very, very simple. And again, I'm going to point you the link in the description to download this code here. You don't need anything other than just copying, pasting. And this is just about reconstructing the full arrival date in the format of year minus separator, and then month minus separator, and then days. This is the arrival date. And then again here is the same script but for the departure date. And then when you have done it, in the same JavaScript I provided you first, which computes the difference between arrival and departure date, it works just the exact same way. So you just replace a start date and end date with the 2 new created custom JavaScript, recreating and rebuilding the arrival and departure date, and let's see whether it works. So let's refresh our preview mode. Okay, our page is fully loaded, so let's get back to Tag Assistant. Let's select again the impression event, and let's see the variables. And as you can see here, these 3 variables reporting respectively the arrival date, the departure date, and again the number of nights is properly filled up. And so now we have tracked everything. All we need to do is to send over that value of 2 night stay, like in our case, so the length of stay, over to Google Analytics. And so to do that, we're going to do the same thing as we did for the combination of adults and children. And so what we need to do is to go back into Google Analytics. This is specifically for Universal Analytics. I'm going to be showing you Google Analytics for in a moment. So, but for Universal Analytics, admin panel, and then in the central column just go to custom definitions, custom dimensions, new custom dimension, and then we just name it loss, length of stay. Just make sure the scope is going to be session, and then create. So we have created a sort of container, a place where we can store the values of the length of stay for each and every session. And now all we need to do is we need to get this number here, which is the custom dimension index or ID, and place it in Google Tag Manager, so that Tag Manager will feed this dimension here in Google Analytics. And so let me go back. We can use, for example, a new Google Analytics tag, universal tag page view. So currently I just have one for all pages, but in reality I would just want to create just one page view, which is only going to be available for the availability page of availability page, right? So this tag here is going to fire only on this page, meaning when people have entered their arrival and departure date, and they are displayed with all available options. So only in that sense. And the way to do it is Universal Analytics, Page View. I'm just going to select my variable, which was already created before. And then we just need to hit this tick box here, enable overwriting settings in this tag, and then under more settings, custom dimensions, index. We just need to place the number, the ID that we are reported with in analytics. So when we created a custom dimension, now length of stay is index number 2, and so I'm gonna use that value here. And all I need to do is to set up the variable that will trigger our length of stay. And so in this case, we have created many, but I just take this. And that's pretty much it. The last thing is that I will need to trigger the tag only on the result page, search result page, which is page path contains a premium index to HTML. And as you can see here is premium index to HTML. So this is just the availability page or rooms and rates page, whatever you want to call it. So I just select this one, save. And so now I have two page view. The first one, the original one, still fires on all pages. And so what I will need to do is that I will need to exclude this tag from firing in the same page, in the same search result page, because we already have the second tab firing. And so I can select that one, and then in here I can apply the triggers and then add exception, and then just select the search result page as an exception and not as a trigger. And so save, and here we are. So let's make the final test. The pages open up, so let's see again in our the tag assistant and the tag assistant page. Let's go back again into our container load. And as you can see here, custom dimension index 2, and the value of 2 has been triggered. And so now I'm gonna have that custom dimension in Google Analytics with all the length of stay triggered and populating my reports. And so you can use it in many different ways. And now I have just started sending over that value, so we will need to wait at least until tomorrow in order to see those values populating our report. But for example, and just again as an example, you can go into the all traffic source and medium and then use it as a secondary dimension, like in here source and medium, and then tomorrow you will see the length of stay values are populating in here with all the values of all your searches. Again, currently is not available because I have just set that up, so it's not yet populating, or it has just started populating. Another way, you can use a custom report. So same as we did last time with the adults and children, you can create a custom report in which your main dimension or your primary dimension is the length of stay, and then you can select all the metrics that you want, so like sessions and then users and so on and so forth. In Google Analytics 4, the process is basically the same. The only difference is that you don't need to record previously a custom dimension. You can just send it as an event parameter. And so we already have a GA4 page view. In this case, I'm going to create a new one, GA4, and then page view, and then again, just availability. And then I'm just going to select the GA4 configuration. Sorry, it's going to be event. Configuration is the GA4. Event name is just going to be page view. It's a custom started event. And I'm going to hit the parameter in here. All right, so I'm just going to put LOS, and I'm just going to attach our length of stay in here. And again, our trigger is just going to be the search result page. I know it went a little bit quite fast, but the point is that in this case you can the setup is slightly different, but the process is more or less the same. We just need to send the value in the format that Google Analytics 4 expected it to be received. In this case, the parameter name is just a parameter. What we can do later on in Google Analytics 4 is to create, under the configure, a custom definition, custom dimension, create a custom dimension. We can call it the way we want, length of stay, event, and then tomorrow you're gonna see here Now it's not going to be open because it's a fresh new demo account, so we still don't have that value populated. But in here, event parameter, you will be able to select the parameter name that you have entered in Google Tag Manager. So this is it. I hope you enjoyed it, and let's see you again in the next video. Bye bye.